Hello and welcome to our first Friday football show of the regular season, brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. Tim Benz and Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News with you. Hopefully you've been with us throughout the preseason. Now the regular season is getting ready to get underway. It did last night, and one thing I can assure you is throughout the course of the next hour, there will be no lightning delays, and no one's going to spit on anyone. Well, at least the second thing I can guarantee. I'm looking outside. Maybe it will get a little dicey before 10 o'clock. Who knows? But good to have you with us. Again, check out Mike's on the North Shore. Get one of their fabulous steak and a stone meals. Try one of their 500 available craft beers right across from the PNC Park left field entrance near the Stargell and Clemente statues. Pirates just swept the Dodgers, if you can believe it. Now they've got the Milwaukee Brewers in town, the best record in Major League Baseball. The Pirates are great at beating the good teams. The teams like themselves, not so much, but that might be a good formula against the Brewers this weekend. So as football gets threaded back into our consciousness, maybe check out the Buccos as well. Regardless of the North Shore, go to Mike's. Meet me at Mike's. All right, Steelers, Jets, Mike, on Sunday. 1 o'clock kick, first game of the regular season for the Steelers. We'll start as we always do here in the Friday Football Show with the view from Mount Washington. It's our 30,000-foot big picture view, the state of the Steelers heading into game day. Why don't you start for week one, your big picture look at the Steelers to start the year and to start this first game?
Yeah, I'm going to go blowing past the typical narratives like the Jets are playing their former quarterback and the Steelers are playing their former quarterback. I mean, who do people really care about that stuff? I never understand that. It happens all the time with the NCAA tournament, which people who follow my work know is a lot of what I do. And I don't care that somebody coached somebody else. Like, who cares? Like, I care about the game.
I kind of care about this one because of the implications, the severity of any time you make a move at quarterback. And does this really portend for the next 16 weeks after this game? Probably not. We are going to have a week-to-week referendum on both teams.
Yes.
But boy, a lot of the referendum for the offseason is going to be initially judged by what happens between Fields and Rodgers on Sunday. I don't think that's escapable.
Well, I think that I honestly, if Aaron Rodgers fails, it won't matter who they let go to let him fail. That if Aaron Rodgers succeeds, it won't matter who they let go to let him succeed. And the way what I was preambling toward was the idea that in the last since 2018, the 2018 season, I'm going to give Ben that. He wasn't as very best, but he was quite good. And we had players fumbling all around him. Remember the Grimble fumble, as I call it, up out in Denver, and multiple others in that game. And that team ultimately did not make the playoffs. But I thought they had playoff caliber quarterback play in that season. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, no. They have not had NFL playoff level quarterback play since then. And this is the chance for Aaron Rodgers to start showing that they have it again. And that's the biggest part of why they've had a playoff drought, a playoff victory drought, is that the quarterback play hasn't been at the level that the others have. Now, there have been other issues. I'm not saying there haven't. I think that the last year's potentially playoff quarterback level was undermined by a too conservative game plan that came from the top and then was filtered through Arthur Smith's running game. But ultimately, they just didn't have it. And I'm curious. I don't know that Aaron Rodgers is going to bring it. I've barely seen him. I saw him in mini camp. I saw him in training camp clips. I did not go out to Latrobe, I'll confess. But I don't know what he has. And even if I had gone out to Latrobe, I'm not sure I'd know. I'm very curious to see. Obviously, the Steelers believe that he does. Mm-hmm. And we'll see how it starts to work on Sunday afternoon.
I want to go back to the point that you made, Mike, about, if Aaron Rodgers succeeds, that doesn't mean who they let go was going to fail or succeed there. Like when you were talking about that, like the one caveat to that I will throw out if Justin Fields succeeds in New York, like if he has a good year and the Steelers weren't able to figure him out after we were to believe that maybe they could since the Bears couldn't figure him out because, that works so well with Mitch Trubisky. If he doesn't work out in New York, then maybe he's just not a good quarterback and it's never going to work. But if the Jets figure out Justin Fields and the Steelers didn't, and they started him for 6 games and they still couldn't keep him because they just didn't want to pony up the money that New York did, well, then that to me is an indictment of how they're evaluating quarterbacks. If they have the guy in their own backyard.
It's not that tough an evaluation. You have to give him a system in which he is set up to succeed. It's really that simple. Now, whether he does it or not, that remains to be seen. But you have to give him a system in which he's set up to succeed. I don't know whether the Jets are going to do that. I can't be sure until we start to see it. I know that Philadelphia ultimately said, we're tired of trying to hammer this square peg into a round hole. Jalen, play like Jalen. And what happened? They won another Super Bowl because they said, look, we're not trying to turn you into Tom Brady anymore. We're going to let you be who you are. So he reads 1, maybe 2, and if it's not there, he moves. And most of the time he moves and he finds avenues into the secondary. Sometimes he moves and extends the play. It doesn't happen that much. But they needed a system in Pittsburgh with Fields that was similar to that. That's what he'll need in New York. We saw it through 6 games last year, trying to make him into a pocket quarterback with running ability. And it's not going to work. It's not who he is. It wasn't who he was at Ohio State. They tried to do it, and he failed for the most part. At Chicago, when they let him run, he ran well. And I'm not saying he's just a running quarterback. Don't get me wrong. He's got a cannon of an arm. We saw it. I can't remember which game it was. It was one of the indoor games. He threw a shot from the opposite hash to the opposite sideline, left to right, on a dime. It was as good a throw as any NFL quarterback made last year. It's not about that. It's just about the way players come up and how they develop. And it's not anything to do with other than where they're most comfortable. And he is most comfortable in a system where if he gets if the first opportunity is open, he hits it. If it's not open, he maybe tries to get it there. But then if that doesn't happen, then he's got too much ability to move to constrain it. And they didn't want to play that way. And I don't know why, but that's not what they wanted. So they're going in the direction now of a quarterback who at his age is going to be a multiple read quarterback, and his legs are not going to be a huge factor. I saw an over and under, Tim. We're going to get to player props later in the show. I saw an over and under, and I'm not still sure whether it was accurate, but over and under for Aaron Rodgers on rushing yards is a half a yard. A half a yard. So they clearly have a design on how they want to play.
Well, my view from Mount Washington, my big picture look to start the season in this game is show me why this year is going to be different. Give me a hint. Show me why I should believe that this team is better than 9-8 and a first-round playoff blowout exit, as has so frequently been the case, or 10-7 like last year. Because we didn't really start to see that until Russ took over at quarterback. Like, they muddled along and they got by 4-2 with Fields for some of the reasons that you just went through. And then they won a couple games with Russ. It wasn't really until that Washington game where we saw, oh, okay, this is what they were talking about the whole year, about what they thought the team could look like with Russell Wilson. And as soon as we started to enjoy it, not too long thereafter, it was gone. And they started to collapse at the end of the year. So what I'm saying is, if, as has been advanced, as has been told to us, as has been projected to us by the players, by the coaches, by the media, the team media, so frequently that covers the team that has such a big voice in Pittsburgh, that this year is going to be different than the formula that got them to 10-7 and a first-round entry, but exit in typical fashion. Let me see why. Give me an early buy-in this year as to why I should gin up that faith that this is going to be different, because we saw no reason in the preseason. They've played so infrequently.
Right.
There's no real reason to hang our hat. We're just betting on theory. We're just betting on the suggestion that it should be different, that this new installation of a future Hall of Fame veteran quarterback trying to restart his career is going to be different than last year's, that the young offensive line is going to be better than last year's when it's the same guys, that the run defense is going to be different because it's different guys. The secondary is going to be different because it's different guys. We're betting a lot on faith. We're betting a lot on theory. Start showing me the evidence right away in September and start against the Jets, a beatable team on the road.
Yeah, I think that's really very important for them to get off to a good start. The schedule is challenging. It's not as nuts as last year's was with the ridiculous cartoon finish that the NFL demanded of them. But it's still a difficult schedule.
What was that cartoon, by the way? Was that Wile E. Coyote going splat into the side of the mountain? Is that the cartoon you're talking about?
That was definitely they were Wile E. Coyote, and the Roadrunner was the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs.
Every other kind of bird.
Yes,
Derrick Henry dropping an anvil on their head, so to speak.
Yes. So they do have a challenging schedule. So I think they could they can navigate it, but it does demand a strong start. It doesn't demand an opening win, but it does demand a strong start in the first month.
Let's get to our keys to victory next, and I'll start off with the Steelers' key to victory on offense, and that's going to be they better disprove the number 2 wide receiver concerns right away, because this could be a difficult matchup for DK Metcalf if he's covered by Sauce Gardner. I know that Gardner popped up on the injury report. We'll see how healthy he is or is not. If he's not or not covering him one-on-one a ton, then I really do think that DK can eat, and we might see something there as far as an early connection between Rodgers and who will no doubt be by far and away his top receiver. But when it comes to matchups beyond that, let's see what these other receivers can do. If they're so much better than what we think, and they're worthy of not having to be bolstered by a Jacoby Myers or Gabe Davis or any of these other names that came through the windshield during the course of the preseason, like Omar Khan was talking about, if this unit is so much better than what it was last year when they were trying to get Ayuk and failed, show us quick. You might have to, because this might not be the easiest of afternoons for DK.
I think it's a great point, and I think it's from when you are at you talked about the view from 30,000 feet. When you're at ground level, it can be easy to overlook the fact that for other teams, the number 2 wide receiver isn't T. Higgins, that it's somebody that was taken in the 3rd round and that you hope will develop, or it's somebody that was taken in the 4th round and has been in the league for a little while and that you hope will blossom and have a huge year. And in some cases, as may be the case with the Steelers, it may be a second tight end, Jonnu Smith, who did not have much to show us in the preseason, but he's not on the injury report as having missed any practice time this week. Mike Tomlin said everybody's a go except for Derek Harmon as the practice week was beginning. So we'll see how that goes. And I think that it's quite possible that Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson develops into a legit number 2 wide receiver. And I think that and Jonnu Smith becomes the number 2 target, so to speak. And I think you can win like that. We have to see it, obviously, but we did see Roman Wilson in the exhibition season make some impressive catches. And I know it's against guys that aren't likely to be starters or might be fringe players or whatever, or might get into games. But a lot of times in games that matter, you're up against somebody else's 4th or 5th cornerback just because the 1st or 2nd or 3rd got hurt either prior to the game or in that particular game. So Roman Wilson has to go out and beat number 2s and number 3s, but he's also going to at times get the opportunity to go up against the 4s and 5s, and he's got to take advantage of that and make himself a worthwhile receiver. What's your offensive key? Yeah, for me, the running game has to happen. I mean, they discarded, and that's a fair description, a 4-time 1,000-yard rusher. And I know that a lot of people got tired of watching Najee run into the line and get tackled for a 1-yard gain, no gain, even a short loss. But he did rush forward often enough to get 1,000 yards in 4 consecutive seasons. Now, I know it's not the same thing as when Franco was doing it in 14 games. But it's still not easy to do, or he wouldn't have been the only player in the league that did it the last 4 years in a row. So they gave up a lot of production there because they didn't like the style. Okay, all right. So your choice, Jaylen Warren, who not only did you put in that position, but paid the money that might have gone to Najee in this particular season. You paid him big in a contract extension, not TJ money, but pretty significant for a running back. So he's got to do it. And I have been on record as saying I think he's the best 1B running back in the league. A great guy to change up, to come in when the other guys worn you down a little bit. His legs are fresh, your legs are not. Great out of the backfield in terms of catching the pass and as a blitz pickup man. He's not Lev Bell as either, but he's pretty good at those things. But is he a 1A?
Did you see Arthur Smith's comments? I mean, like, he certainly didn't infer that he was. I mean, he was asked, and he could have just said yes. I mean, whether he believed it or not as a coach, he could have just said yes. And he said every word in the dictionary but yes. Like, he was asked about Jaylen Warren, and he started talking about Gainwell and Johnson and the three of them as a three-pack. So, like, to me, that's not a yes. Like, yes. It wasn't a no, but it wasn't an affirmative either.
But if they don't believe it, then why did they pay him like a 1A?
Exactly. That was the most interesting part about it. It was 48 hours, 36 hours removed from him getting the contract extension, which was bizarre to me.
Yeah. So again, I have to see it, but maybe it doesn't matter to them because they've got Caleb Johnson on a rookie deal for 3 to 4 years. So maybe it doesn't matter. And they just wanted the assurance. Maybe they thought a 1B. And as I said, maybe they believe what I believe. He's as good a 1B as there is in the league. And that's worth what they paid him. Maybe that's what they believe. I certainly believe it's worth retaining him to be the best 1B in the league. But if he's not the 1A, then Caleb Johnson has got to be good fairly soon.
My defensive key is you better figure it out against the run after what we saw at the end of last year. No Derek Harmon, don't care. Rusty Cam Hayward, don't care. Overexposed rookie 5th-round draft choice who's just getting acclimated to the NFL and YA Black, don't care. Do better than last year. You have to. And I know that the Jets just lost Elijah Vera Tucker along the offensive line. That's huge. I think their center's moving to guard, and then the backup center is going to take over. Myers at center. Tippmann's going to guard, I believe, is how they're going to do it. Exploit that then. You got to be better, and it can't be an excuse thing. It's got to be a results thing. Be better against the run, especially since the Jets want to run. They want to lean into Fields. Right. They want to lean into Hall. So they want to lean into Allen. They don't want Fields to have to throw. So make them throw by taking away the run, whether you're ready for it or not, given the circumstances of how camp ended with the run defense, with obviously all the talk about Cam not practicing, but the holdout and all that, the hold in, and Harmon's status starting things off on the injured list.
Yeah, they're going to miss Derek Harmon. I think he was ready to play at a high level, rookie level at least. So they'll miss him, but it can't be a disaster, whether it's YA or even Loudermilk, who has been a fairly effective run stopper. Somebody's got to plug that hole, and then Cam has to be out there. And there's been a lot of conversation this week about whether he plays or not. I can't imagine a world in which he does not play. Everything that he's built up over the last 15 years or so in this town, it gets major damaged if he doesn't suit up on Sunday. And I think he knows that. And he can be coy about it, still hoping that they might be able to get a couple extra dollars out of this. I don't have any problem with that. Do what you got to do. You should have anticipated all this. It was on you and your agent in the beginning, but you cannot miss this game for any reason other than you sprained your ankle on the way to the field. I mean, you can't miss this game. For me, I'm also looking at something similar, but a little bit different in that. For me, this comes down to communication in the secondary, and I think that plays into some of what you're talking about in effectiveness against the run. The way I look at it is, I've heard a lot about being just slightly over 500 for all the past near decade, and and how people have complained about that. And I've always maintained the position that it's not that far from just over 500 to way under 500 in the NFL.
Yes.
So, but the thing that that I'm so sick of hearing about him is communications issues in the secondary. I mean, it's preposterous.
It's fixable.
And it's year after year after year. It's the same complaint. And it's, my goodness, you guys are professionals. They can't continue to go on. Oh, we blew that coverage because we couldn't communicate. What are you talking about? I mean, do you have is it like a soccer team in England where one guy speaks English because he grew up in London, but the other three guys are from Spain, France, and Italy, and so no, you all speak English. You all grew up playing football. It is ridiculous how often this becomes an issue. So now you have a secondary that is built because of what we know to be. We don't know what the design will be, but we know it's not exactly just two guys on the outside and two guys safety. And when they bring in an extra wideout, now you have a nickel. No, there's going to be a lot more going on than that based on what they've been talking about. And even the glimpse we saw of them against Charlotte, against the Carolina Panthers, it is atypical. So communication has to be precise and pristine. And there's no excuse this time. If you mess up the communication, it's on you, and it's on how it's being taught.
My bonus key is they had the special teams advantage a lot of times last year. A lot is riding on their special teams this year, with Boz needed to be clutch every time he kicks. Waitman winning the punting battle, and they've got an injured long snapper too to start the year in Christian Kuntz, although he's going to try to give it a go. It looks like, they rob occasional points with block kicks. I think it's part of the reason why Loudermilk is still on the team, because he occasionally blocks a kick or at least clouds the vision for the opposing kicker. The special teams need to be just as good, if not better, than what they were last year, where I think it masked some problems here and there offensively and helped them out. The special teams need to be every bit as on point, if not more so, this season.
Yeah, and that's, to me, I mean, I guess theoretically, depending on how the toss goes, if they win the toss, it's going to start with their kick coverage. I was really disappointed in how their kickoff coverage went in the preseason. I thought it was really poor. They got gashed a lot. And you think, okay, so if you're not good against the opposing team's run or the opposing team's pass, well, that's not your ones out there, so it's okay most of the time. But I got to think that for the most part, you're sending your kick teams out with the guys you plan to play there. You don't have to worry about protecting Cam Hayward in that too much and all that. So most of the guys that are covering kicks are going to cover kicks in the preseason and in the regular season. So it's got to be better. They can't be giving up the 40, 45-yard line every time a team decides to return the ball. Maybe it was just they're trying a few things differently on how they worked it and all that. We don't know, again, until it starts. But I worry about that a little bit, because that, of all the special teams things you talked about, that was the one that was always a little bit sort of on the balance beam and could go either way.
What's yours to wrap up here?
That was it.
Oh,
my concern about
you're
the
just
coverage.
saying you're saying the coverage on top of the special teams.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe your point about the special teams is right, but I have a particular concern. The others are strengths that have to stay strengths. This is one that was just okay and can't, as it did in the preseason, collapse toward near calamitous.
All right, so those are our keys to victory. You can comment as well. Please chime in. We will get to some comments. I got some loaded up for the end of the show. You can comment live as well on YouTube and on Facebook. We'll get to those as the show rolls along. But I do want to get to our next segment, which is on the other sideline. This is where we look at the opponent for the Steelers in week one. It is the Jets in New York at MetLife Stadium, of course. And I'll take an angle that's familiar to Steelers fans. We've just talked about it a little bit already, and I'll apply it to the Jets. I guess the Steelers aren't the only team in the NFL where, and Mike, you were alluding to this earlier, where you have wide receiver depth questions and concerns, because there's Garrett Wilson for New York. And then aside from that, it's kind of a couple of wide receivers that were bandied around maybe as guys the Steelers could pick up because Aaron Rodgers is here. And we all went, really? Like Alan Lazard? Like, do we want to do that next? The Jets are very much in the same position, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how Wilson is without Rodgers and with Fields, but he's
Right.
their number one. And then after that, it's, all right.
Right.
Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, Mason Taylor, we'll see what he is, the tight end that they got in the second round. So I think from a Steelers coverage point of view, if this new look secondary is what it's supposed to be, they should be able to find a way to minimize Wilson from going crazy and still not get gashed by everybody else. I don't think they have to overload on Wilson and then find themselves naked trying to figure out how to cover the rest of the Jets wide receivers and find themselves in a sticky situation. I think they should be able to handle both tasks.
Yeah, for me, it's somewhat along the same lines, but I'm starting at the beginning of the process, and that's Justin Fields. I mentioned before about how not really all that wired up into the whole storyline concept, but I am curious to see how they're going to deploy Justin Fields and whether or not they're going to put him in a system that is friendly to the way he plays. And as you mentioned, let's just say Jalen Ramsey becomes a shadow against Garrett Wilson, who I watched play a ton at Ohio State and think he's terrific. I think other than Marvin Harrison, I think he's the most talented wideout that's come through Ohio State in this decade. I love him as a player. But if Jalen Ramsey can make it difficult for Justin Fields to get a clean look at Wilson, what do the Jets want Wilson to do next? What are the options for him beyond the first option, which would on most plays be Wilson? I'm very curious to see how they want to use him. And that has an impact on how the Steelers defend him. And that's the difficult thing of facing a quarterback who has so many different ways he can hurt you in week one before you've discovered how the opposition wants to deploy him. He's never played in a real game for the Jets, so we don't know 100% how they want to use him. They know what Justin looks like they have a book on what Justin looks like in a basic offense because he did that for 6 games for them last year to varying degrees of success. And then they saw him in scout team reps last year doing all kinds of different things. I'm sure they saw him in Eagles type offense and Ravens type offense as they were preparing to play those opponents. So I'm very curious to see how he is deployed and how the Steelers react to that. It's going to be a challenge.
The Justin Fields thing again, kind of going back to last year and underscoring my point from when we opened the show about this potentially being an indictment of how the Steelers evaluate quarterbacks, bring in quarterbacks, whatever. Like last year, I got the very tangible sense watching every game that Fields started in those first 6 weeks and felt like they were scared to death to let him be Justin Fields and run around and design plays for him to run because they were scared to get to Kyle Allen as the third string quarterback. Right. Because Russ was injured, they didn't want to get the number 2 starter injured too and then try to muddle along with number 3. But in so doing, they muddled along with Justin Fields, and it was enough to win 4 out of 6 times, surprisingly, and the defense was great to start the year for the most part, especially in the 4 victories, not enough in the 2 losses. But that to me is an indictment of the theory that Mike Tomlin doesn't live in his spheres. Every time he says that, I roll my eyes and laugh because he lives in his spheres more than just about any coach I've seen. And he's frequently coaching away from the negative as opposed to coaching the positive. You bring in Justin Fields to back up Russ Wilson at age 33 or whatever Russ was last year. It's not going to be the same offense. You're going to have a different offense. So be ready to implement it if you've got to go to the backup. And Russ kept telling us if he wasn't ready to go, he was close for 6 weeks, but they stayed with Fields and they just elected to try to plod along and win games in the teens and have Justin not be Fields himself, but also they knew he was never going to be Russ either. And that drove me nuts over the first 6 weeks.
The way he would probably spin it is to say that he lives in his strengths and he felt that they could win those games by controlling the opposing offense and then making enough plays on offense to win. And they did that 4 out of 6 times in the early part of the year. And then at the end of the year, when there was a legitimate reason to play that way for some of December, a lot of December, Baltimore game, Eagles game, they did, in a lot of those circumstances, throw out KC because they were bad from the time the ball went in the air. But in those two games, they were competitive into the second half. And in both cases, they lost the game, or they lost their grip on the game, I should say, because of turnovers, which was not a common thing for them. But blows up the whole idea. Well, you can't make mistakes. But the Bengals game is an illustration of that very concept. They tried to win the game 19-18, and they wound up losing it 18-14 or whatever it was, because they tried after scoring 45 points on the Bengals defense. They didn't trust themselves to go out and do that again. And so that's that. I agree with you in the sense that he often just exists in that week to try to win every game 19-18, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't care about the style. And sometimes what you have to understand is that either mistakes such as the fumbles, or you may be making a few, your guys may be making a few defensive errors. You're going to need to put 28 points up on the board. You're going to need to put 30 points up on the board sometimes. And when you constrain yourselves from that, that becomes an issue, as it did in the Cincy game, and obviously as it did in the regular season Ravens game, second game, and the Eagles game. When you made those mistakes, you couldn't recover from them because you had built the entire thing around a conservative approach. And maybe that's where maybe that's where Aaron Rodgers changes everything, because if he is an approximation of himself, a strong approximation of himself, or is himself, then okay, if this game plan didn't go the way we wanted, Aaron, go win the game. They used to do it with Ben all the time when Ben was at his best.
When he was Ben, yeah.
Yeah. So he couldn't do that in 21. He couldn't do that in 20, but he could in 2017. And it did that's the difference that they have to now apply. And I know that they don't love it, because in 2017, the Jacksonville game went the way it went because they said, Ben, we don't have Shazier anymore. We got a truck driver at linebacker. We need you to put a bunch of points up on the board. And he did for both teams. So that's kind of why they've gotten to this level.
Let's move on here. Let's get to our stat pack. And I'm going to stay with the quarterback conversation for a minute as we get to our stat of the game. And I'm going to credit Rich Cimini, who joined me on the Breakfast with Benz podcast this week. He covers the Jets for ESPN.com. Another Syracuse guy, Mike. Go Orange. Not so great against Tennessee, but we're still great from Newhouse. Justin Fields. This is a stat that Rich came up with, all right? Because I think we spent a lot of time justifying the Aaron Rodgers acquisition for the Steelers by way of where is he going to be better than Russ Wilson? And unfortunately, you can't have the counting stats comp because Rodgers played 17 games last year and Russ didn't. Russ only played in the last 11 games of the regular season, the one playoff game. But if you looked at yards per attempt, average yards per completion, the completion percentage, passer rating, things like that, actually Russ had better numbers in a lot of cases than Aaron Rodgers did. Here's the stat that Rich came up with that I was not ready for. Justin Fields, over his last 17 starts, has an equal completion percentage, better yards per attempt, and a better passer rating than Aaron Rodgers. That blew my mind. If you look at the numbers, the yards per attempt is 7 to 6.7 Fields to Rodgers. Passer rating is 91.2 to 90, and completion percentage, it's exactly the same at 63% apiece. When it comes to passing the football, that is supposed to be Fields' weak point.
Right.
And, a lot of this might dovetail with some other things that we brought up about Fields' time in Pittsburgh, where they weren't pressing the envelope and they weren't asking him to make difficult throws. So some of these numbers, by extension, then are bloated in his favor as opposed to what Rodgers had to do to play catch up a lot of times with the Jets. I get that. But over a 17-game sample size, you would think that the disparity would be greater especially since Rodgers brings nothing to the table in terms of rushing, and Fields, that's his strength.
That's an interesting comparison, and I don't know if I've been on record on this show, but this is not something I'm making up, and at least I haven't seen a game yet, so I don't feel like I'm coming late to this. I was always in favor of signing Fields on a short-term deal, a 2-year type deal, similar type money to what the Jets gave him. I don't think the money they gave him is exorbitant. And building an offense around what he does well. I believe in him. I do. I don't know whether the Jets can find it because their level of competence has been in question for a while.
So you would have given him 40 over 2?
I around that. I mean, I think 30 is guaranteed. So it's, it doesn't really make a dent in your salary cap that much.
So if we go with the guarantee money, it's like 30 that he's going to get guaranteed, like you said. And then I think the Steelers were only willing to go to about 15 guaranteed.
Yeah, I don't know why. That obviously they didn't believe, and that's fine. I didn't.
It was an offer. It just wasn't a real one, especially compared to what the Jets are going to give him.
It was an offer that if no one else in the league at all thinks you can play, we think you can kind of play, is basically what they said. But the Jets said, no, we think he can play. That was their response. No, we think he can play, and we'll find out. And in the meantime, we won't take a huge risk. $30 million is not a huge risk in the quarterback market, just as the 15 or 20 that the Steelers will pay Rodgers is not. It's just for one fewer year, but they have less coverage for the year of the rookie that the Steelers will celebrate in 2026. So,
or so we think. We'll get to that.
I'm not a gambling man, Tim, but I would put everything just about. I'm not going to, but I would put everything on the fact that they will draft a quarterback.
I would put some, not everything, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
I can say that because I won't do it, but it's. I know it's hyperbole, but for me, I think that the stat that strikes me the most coming into this game is 6-2-1. That is the Steelers' record in opening games that were on the road over the last 10 years. And so that says a lot on both sides. It says, first of all, that's a pretty good number, 6-2-1 in road openers. If it was just your road opener, that would be impressive. But no, this is the road opening game. They have played on the road in 9 of their last 10 season openers and have won better than 70% of them. That's an impressive mark. But it also is preposterous that they've opened on the road 9 of the last 10 years. What?
Yeah.
Like everything about the way the NFL does business would say they would open 5-5 or 6-4, something like that. But 9 out of 10 is ridiculous and inexplicable. And unless the Steelers, and I think they have refuted this, unless the Steelers are saying to the league, we don't want to open at home, I just can't understand that number. It's just a ridiculous.
Well, I don't know. It's got to be a little bit part of the fact that they've got a Major League Baseball team that shares the same parking lot in September. I think that plays into it some.
But they could just as easily be at home in the second week. The Pirates could of September as they are in the first.
I don't know how it's fallen.
Although they've checked out on the league race, they're still playing the games.
Yeah, right. Because they can sweep the Dodgers apparently in September. But yeah, it is weird, and it doesn't have to be that way, but it has been. Let's get to who will take flight. That's where we talk about who we think is going to be a star player for the Jets and the Steelers and their opponent each and every week. We also want to mention Monday night. Flight night at Mike's. So go there and watch Monday Night Football. I think it's the Bears and Vikings this week for Monday Night Football. Get yourself a flight. Try a couple of their many craft beers. There are 500 craft beers that are available. I love to go to Mike's and get flights. I do that all the time when I go. I'm going to go with 2 defensive players, 2 guys along the defensive front, 1 from each team. For the Steelers, who will take flight for me, Y.A. Black. I'm going to go with the rookie defensive lineman for some of the reasons we've gotten to already. What with Harmon being out and Cam has been in this mushy middle of whether he's playing or not, and I don't know how well conditioned he is, and the whole goal for this year was to try to get less reps for him anyway. Y.A. Black was maybe their most intriguing player in the preseason. The guy that they got the most out of with the least amount of hype coming in was probably Y.A. Black, especially on defense. They liked him as a 5th-round pick, kind of a bonus defensive lineman to add bulk to what was a need position. That's how the pick was characterized, I think appropriately so at the time. He's looked better than that. I think he's going to have to be better than that this week. I think they should lean into his playing time. They shouldn't avoid it just because he is a rookie. I mean, you got down to Isaiah Loudermilk right away, Mike, when you were talking about depth defensive linemen. So give me a lot of Y.A. Black, and with Vera Tucker being out, I think that's potentially an opportunity for this rookie to shine. McDonald, remember, he's a guy who will forever be linked to the Broderick Jones pick, because if you follow the narrative, and it was a fun one, when Belichick tried to screw the Jets by trading with the Steelers so the Steelers could move up to get Broderick Jones, the Jets then panicked, didn't know where to go next, and they just said, Will McDonald, kind of like a fantasy draft or something like that. Oh, my God, you took the quarterback right before I was going to take my quarterback. Give me a third wide receiver who's a rookie. Not that I did that at all in my fantasy drafts this week. But Will McDonald was sort of that guy. And actually, he ended up last year having a great start to the season. I think he had 8 sacks over the first 7 weeks or something along those lines, but then only 2.5 over the last 10. He faded as the season went along. He's going to be over. He's listed as a left defensive end. I think his home is usually on the left side of the Jets defense, which means he's over Fautano on the right side for the Steelers. But I was talking with Kevin Marr from News 12 New York, another Syracuse guy, Mike, my previews for Breakfast with Benz. He says expect him to move around. He's going to bounce around. He got a sack last year against the Steelers. It's going to be fascinating to me anytime he's over Broderick Jones. What kind of a test is he going to provide for Broderick Jones? I think McDonald could have a splash play or 2, maybe 3, going against those young tackles. Keep an eye on him. And we haven't talked enough about the offensive line really to this point. We talked a lot about the running backs and the quarterbacks and their role. I think this offensive line is the key to the season. If it stagnates, if it regresses, if it doesn't move forward exponentially as it has to with the draft capital invested in that unit, we are going to be talking about potentially Mike Tomlin's first losing season, because I think that much is wrapped up in the improvement of the offensive line this year.
Yeah, you mentioned they have the same guys, but the same guys are all in different positions in a sense, in that Broderick Jones is now a left tackle and Troy Fautano is now a healthy tackle. So they are a little bit different in that sense. And I agree with you that when I talked before about the running game and I got not sidetracked, but got focused on Jaylen Warren because he got signed this week, that offensive line is a huge part of that running game, if not the biggest part, to be honest. For my guys, my flight guys, I'm going to go with Jalen Ramsey for starters, because Jalen in that Carolina game looked like he was really, 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 really ready to play some real football. Because he went a little over the edge there on the one play, making the tackle, which was a beautiful play, and then turning it into a 15-yard penalty. Unnecessarily.
Well, he didn't spit on the guy, and that's pretty much the barometer. Exactly. That's the line for all things, Mike. Did he spit first?
Not at all.
No,
he didn't even think about it. I didn't have a problem with it because it was exhibition, and who cared? I liked it showed that he wants to go, and especially in that the third exhibition, a lot of vets are like, just get me to the season, and he wanted to play in that game, and he wanted to go back out for another series after that. So I think he's going to be really, really, really ready for the regular season. And on the other side, I'm going Sauce Gardner. I know he popped on the injury report, but he did practice in full on Thursday. So no reason. And he had said earlier that he was going to be fine. So he's following through on that, unless there's some sort of aggravation that happens today, Friday, or over the weekend. He'll be out there. And Sauce is a phenomenal football player. It has been from the time they put him on the field at Cincinnati. It was obvious that he was special, and he has carried that into the league. He's going to make it hard for DK Metcalf. He's got a tough assignment in DK. I think that when we talked before about the secondary receivers, whatever, if we want to call them that, Jonnu and Roman and the others, they're going to have a big game, because I don't think that DK's coming out party is going to happen in the opener, not with Sauce trailing him.
Let's get to our Around the League segment. We'll start with last night, the opener. The Eagles win in a game that ended 14 minutes ago, based on my clock, after the weather delay last night. Go ahead, Mike. I brought it up. You've alluded to it. The Jalen Carter episode last night. What a way for the National Football League to ring in the season, huh?
I thought it was just horrific. And for it to happen, sometimes you see things happen in a game. Now there's this line that he crossed is never justified. And there might be only one thing that would ever justify it. And I don't think based on what we saw that's likely. But sometimes you see guys get going because they've been going at it for a while through the course of 40, 50 minutes of the most physical sport that exists. And you can see where someone would lose their temper and do something that would be very objectionable within the confines of a football game. But this is way beyond that. And it happened before a play had even been run, before a play from scrimmage had even been run. There's no excuse for what Jalen Carter did. I don't know what the parameters are for an NFL suspension on something like that. I'm pretty sure they restrict it from being as severe as I might apply if I were just to do it based on what was done. But I look, Jalen Carter's been involved in other things in the past that were worse than this. But from an on-the-field standpoint, within the confines of a football stadium, within the confines of a 100-yard field, what he did was the ultimate sin, and whatever punishment can be applied for him expectorating in the direction of, I don't know where it landed, but in the direction of an opposing player, Dak Prescott, whatever the maximum is, he should get twice that.
Is this going to be like the Seinfeld thing where they're looking at the loogie? Like,
yes.
Yeah. The Kramer. My thing from Thursday night was Pickens and how quiet he was. 3 catches, 30 yards. He did draw the big pass interference penalty, so give him credit for that. He almost came up with a one-handed catch as the result, although I wonder if he could have gone for 2 hands with that. But at any rate, not a big night for him. And then CeeDee Lamb put up great numbers at over 100 yards, was targeted 13 times. He was open all night, but he only caught 7 of them. He dropped 3 or 4, including just an absolutely key drop late that swung the whole narrative of the game. And then maybe that last one he could have come up with too when he was diving for it. So the Dallas receivers were very much a talking point for me. I know everything was, Micah this, Micah gone. How's the pass rush going to look? But my eyes were drawn to what happened with the receivers.
You have to wonder how George felt after that game, getting so few targets and watching, like if CeeDee had caught all those balls, I mean, the first half or so, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, CeeDee Lamb took your breath away. He was making beautiful plays. And then he dropped a relatively routine, certainly for a 1A receiver, he dropped a relatively routine ball and then dropped a ball that required a fairly spectacular catch, but again, the kind of catch that George Pickens makes, and certainly CeeDee Lamb makes on the regular, but that George has to be wondering, hey, if they'd throw me the ball, I'd have caught them. I'd have had us in there. And that's how George operates, because George was the unquestioned one in Pittsburgh for basically 3 seasons and still wasn't happy. So if he's a 2 now getting below 2 targets, while the 1 gets above 1 targets, he's got to be unhappy, not just because they lost the game.
All right, let's get to our comments. You too can comment. Go ahead and post them online here on YouTube and on Facebook. I'm going to go, Frank, if you're listening back there behind the other side of the wall, our imaginary wall. I'm going to start backwards here and begin with Jim. Our last one. I'm going to go in reverse order because I want to get to the QBs since we flirted with this conversation before, Mike, and I want to give it a little time to air out. Jim says, as if anybody knows which, if any, of these massively hyped QBs will be a difference maker in the pros. Anybody still in line to tank for Arch? Well, yes, the Browns are always in line to tank for anybody. So let's put that. I think the Browns are going to be a 5 or 6 win team, and I think they're going to play 5 or 6 quarterbacks, some of whom aren't on the roster right now, although they had about 5 or 6 at any point during training camp. The college weekend that was, I'm going to avoid doing this perhaps in like October, November, because I'm going to get sick of it. I don't want to make this a referendum every week on who the Steelers are going to draft in October and November. Okay. But like there wasn't a single quarterback that completely blew my doors off. and I said, that's got to be the guy. Like, even a lot of people were talking about Nussmeier from LSU. Yeah, he was good. I was watching that game, and I said, you know what? I really like that LSU running back. I really like that LSU tight end. I really like that guy from Purdue that Clemson stole now that he finally decided to get in the portal, that pass rusher. So, like, I ended up liking other guys more than the quarterbacks in that game. Like, you said you'd bet everything you have on them drafting a quarterback. I think it's likely. If they are 9-8 or 10-7 and they get in the playoffs, like, what if they are 10-7 and Aaron Rodgers wins a playoff game? Who's to say they don't try to bring back Rodgers if he decides he wants? He's already walking back his declaration on the McAfee show that this is going to be it. He's already softened that a couple times over. So, like, I'm not 100% convinced it is going to be a QB. And even if Rodgers is not in position to come back to the Steelers, it's going to be hard to trade up if they are 9-10 win team. You got to get into the top 10 if all these guys are going to fly off the board. I don't think it's a lock. And maybe I don't want it to be a lock if they have to overdraft like they did with Kenny Pickett a couple of years ago.
Well, first of all, if all the guys we talked about, Nussmeier, Klubnik, etc., Arch, if they all bust, if they all look like another Kenny Pickett by next March, and I don't think that's going to be the case, but let's put that out there, then no, don't do it. But the assumption is that there will be, because there are so many candidates, and I only mentioned a small segment of them, that some of them will prove themselves or demonstrate themselves to be worthwhile NFL starting quarterbacks who are draft one worthy. Don't do Kenny again. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that it's highly likely that some of those guys, more than one, less than seven, will be worthy first-round picks that you can spend. And I think the number is the Steelers have 13 draft picks that they have to work with. Some of them aren't tradable because they're comp picks, but a lot of them are, that they can use to move up from wherever they land. And unless they win the Super Bowl, we assume it'll be probably somewhere in the 20 to 25 range, more toward 20 than 25. That they'll be able to move up into that position. And again, partly because you've got so many picks to spend, partly because there aren't going to be 10 teams that are in that 1 to 10 range that all want quarterbacks. There'll be teams that have already done it. The Bears, for instance, so if they happen to wind up there again, that won't want to do it again. And so they'll be looking for more good players in other positions. So I understand your point. I think that part of the adventure for a Steelers fan, though, this college football season is looking at guys like Nussmeier and seeing if they've
keeping
got
me
it.
engaged more, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
I mean, I watched the LSU game in part with great interest, in part because I had just done a profile on Brian Kelly and his circumstance there at LSU, but also because I wanted to see what Klubnik and Nussmeier had. I would have watched Ohio State, Texas, no matter what. But yeah, I wanted to see what Arch looked like and see what he had. And honestly, it didn't matter the results to me. I want to see how they play and what I see of their arms and how they process and all that sort of stuff. And that was my first look at Arch. And I'll be honest, I'm not writing it off, but I kind of didn't like it.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming. Yeah.
Not the results, what I saw and how he played. And again, I'm not going to make a final decision based on having watched a little bit more than half of his first game as a regular starter against a terrific team in game one. But there were things that I wondered about that he'll have to answer. Not obviously he's not worried about whether Mike DeCourcy thinks he's a big time player or not, but that he will have to answer those questions, no doubt, for the teams that are looking at him.
All right, Frank, we'll go back in order here from the start. I'm going to run these two back to back. This one comes from RB75012. He says Cam better be playing on Sunday. He better be from a tactical standpoint for the Steelers in the run defense. We talked about that already, and I think he better be from a legacy point of view. I don't think he gets to the point where he walks away and doesn't play a game. You know, he might be speaking here, Mike, by the time we wrap up or close to it over on the South Side. He was considering speaking with the media. Well, thank you very much for that, Cam. At some point, from what I understand yesterday. I want to get to this one, though, from Rob, who is also along the lines of the Cam conversation. Why is anyone other than him worried about this? It's not yours or anyone else's situation. When he makes it this public, it absolutely is our business.
Yeah.
If he goes on his own podcast and says that we'll see if I play, then that's going to lead everybody who's in the media, everybody else who has a podcast like this one, everybody else who has a live stream. Heck, if you're just guys talking about it at the bar, it's your business because he made it so. And he's not practicing throughout training camp so that it's a public training camp where everybody can walk out and see practice at St. Vincent College. So, like, it is other people's business. It's a public business.
Yes.
You know, like, so I can't get all high and mighty about, oh, it's none of your business what he makes. It is, because there's a salary cap and this is a public sport, and he talked about it on his own forum. It's our business.
Well, it's not my concern what he makes, especially as when the Steelers have no cap issues at all. It's not my concern how much money he makes. It is my concern how he goes about getting to making that money, up to and including missing competition. I don't worry, and we talked about this during the preseason on this show. I don't worry that he missed camp or didn't participate that much, because at his age, as Mike Tomlin said on Tuesday, my job is to get him through Latrobe and into week one without any dents and bruises, basically. And that happened. So he's good. And in Mike's mind on Tuesday, at least publicly, he's, Cam Hayward, number 97, is going to be playing on right defensive end, the first defensive possession. That's the way he presented it to us. But what was presented subsequent to that? We'll see. That was subsequent. TJ saying you'll have to talk to him. That was subsequent. So all of that plays into why we would be concerned about it, because it's not simply that he's hoping to get more money and he's negotiating with the Steelers. He's going through all these public machinations that are designed to promote conversation, controversy, angst, whatever, maybe, and which would theoretically, although the Steelers aren't going to operate like this, would create public pressure to sign him to a better deal and make sure that he's on the field on Sunday. That's his play. So of course we're going to be concerned about it.
Last one quickly from Kurt before we get to our predictions and wrap up here, Mike. Kurt says, how is it possible? The head coach says, we'll see if a player that isn't hurt will play in the next game. If he's thinking of not playing, he should be suspended. Well, it wasn't the coach who said that. It was the player himself who said, we'll see. The coach made it sound like he was playing, and they don't have to suspend him. If he's thinking about not playing, then he just doesn't show up. That's sort of the point. I mean, like, they don't want to suspend him. They want him to play. So they just want to pay him what he's slated to make and hope he shows up and puts on the shoulder pads. So, like, we could be all sanctimonious about it and say suspend him for even thinking about it, but that's sort of a self-defeating prophecy here.
That reminds me of one of my favorite Jim Valvano stories. He's told this story. I don't know if it's true or not. Could be apocryphal, but he told a story about how he was mad at a referee and he said to the ref, "Can you tech me for what I think?" And the ref said, "No, I can't do that." And he said, "Okay, I think you suck." So that's kind of where we are with Cam right now. We'll suspend you for thinking that you deserve more money.
I think Sterator's passed along that story too. So if it's a apocryphal, it's gotten to the refs themselves, because I've heard that one from Gene, I'm pretty sure, over the years as well. All right, let's get to our predictions, Mike. I'm going to say Steelers 15-13 in this game. I'll go with, let's not only do a prediction for the game, let's also do a prediction for where we think the Steelers will be overall in the standings, their final record. And we always like to give one player prop too. So my prediction is Steelers win 15-13 for all the many, many reasons we've talked about. It's going to be a rock fight. It's going to be special teams, field goal oriented. I think we see drives that stall if they get going at all. I think it's going to be rusty offense, not very good offense. You can mix and color the two however you want. But Steelers win 15-13. Maybe some good defense sprinkled in there too, hopefully. Steelers 9-8. I think they finished third in the division. maybe lose out on a tiebreaker or by a game behind the Bengals, who I think will be at least better in September and have a better defense because it can't be worse. So I think the Bengals will finish second in the division. I think I'm going basically with the same prediction that I had last year. 9-8 and the last team to not make the playoffs. 8th in the conference, 3rd in the division, 4th in the wild card race, however you want to say it. They will be the last team hanging on the outside looking in. I think that the sum of the parts should be greater than the whole, but it won't be. The parts, I think, are better this year with the Steelers, but I just don't see it coalescing to the point that they are better, and I don't know if Aaron Rodgers stays upright for 14, 13 games, which he probably has to for them to make the postseason. So that's my prediction on them for the season. Here are my player props for you. I like 2 of them. Same thing, basically. Running backs, receiving yards. Breece Hall, over 18.5 receiving yards. Good receiving back, has hurt the Steelers there in the past, catching the ball. Jaylen Warren, we all know he's good out of the backfield, catching the ball. Jaylen Warren, over 19.5 receiving yards. Those are my 2 player props that I like.
So I'm going to go Steelers 24-17. I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to have to throw the ball. I don't know.
That's way higher scoring than I anticipated you going.
Yeah, I could be wrong. But that goes back to the whole, we don't have much to go on other than history. And history doesn't, especially histories that are from other places. Jaylen Warren's history from over here, Jonnu Smith's history from over here, Aaron Rodgers' history from here, there, and everywhere. We don't really know exactly what this team is going to look like, but I just have a feeling that Aaron Rodgers is going to have to complete some passes for them to win this game. I don't see. I still have my doubts about Jaylen Warren as the primary running back. Secondary running back, love him. Couldn't love him more. Primary, just don't love the concept. We'll see how it is in practice. I have the Steelers going 10-7. I have second in the AFC North, could be third. They're going to be right there with the Bengals, I think. And I mean, maybe the tiebreak gives one of them a higher seed. And maybe in the end, I don't think so if they're both 10-7, but maybe in the end, one of them gets knocked out of the playoffs. But I think they'll make the playoffs if they make 10-7. And my prop is Aaron Rodgers. The number I saw online was 202.5 passing yards.
I thought you were going to say he was going to run for a whole yard. I thought we were going to go over.
No, I saw that, but I'm not going there because my first thought was, do I want to do all of the research that I have to do to see how sacks are recorded relative to a quarterback and whether they take his passing? So I didn't even want to think about it. I just said, I told you before, I think he's going to have to throw the ball successfully in this game. The number that I saw was 202.5. I think he'll top that.
I got Philly and Buffalo in the Super Bowl, and I finally have Buffalo winning a Super Bowl. I think they go through Baltimore and the Eagles to get there. What do you think?
Very interesting. I like Buffalo making the Super Bowl. I think it's time. And it's interesting. If it doesn't happen this year, it's going to be one of those things where they say, will it ever happen? I do think KC takes a step back. Not a
degree that they don't win the division?
No, I don't think so. To the degree that they aren't
in the AFC Championship game,
that they aren't in the championship game, that they certainly don't make the Super Bowl. I see things. I think they did a really nice job of keeping their dynasty relevant and whole for a long time, but I thought that they peeled back a little bit too much in advance of last year, and you could see it. And I think that you're going to see it even more now. So I don't have them making the Super Bowl. I agree with your Super Bowl pick of the Bills getting there. I don't know about the Eagles getting back. They made a lot of personnel changes too. I'm not sure exactly who I would have from the NFC because there are so many different teams that could be not. I like Washington continuing to advance. I think Jaden Daniels is going to have a great sophomore year, which, as you know, is relatively rare for guys who've had great rookie years, especially at that position. But I think he's going to have a terrific sophomore year, and I would watch out for the Commanders.
That'll do it for us. We are back next week. Week 1 in the books. Make sure you check out the Pregame Show podcast, also brought to us by Mike's Beer Bar. We'll have segments from this show, as well as my conversations with Rich Zamini and Kevin Marr previewing the Jets. Joe Rutter from the Steelers facility with me after Mike Tomlin's press conference. Commentary, news notes, predictions, and more on the pregame show podcast, which will be put up in advance of Steelers Jets on Sunday. And we'll be back with you before the home opener against the Seattle Seahawks right here on the Friday Football Show with myself, Tim Benz, and Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. Meet me at Mike's.